Hello, everyone. Welcome to today's webinar hosted by Netacea and Forrester. Today, we're going to be talking about bot management in the age of offensive AI. I'm very pleased to be joined today. I'm Andy Still. I'm CTO and the co-founder of Netacea, so I'll be your host today. I'll be joined today by Sandy Carielli from Forrester. And sorry, I've just covered your. I'll be joined today by Sandy Carielli, who's principal analyst from Forrester, and Cyril Notego, who is a principal security researcher here at Netacea. Thank you guys for joining me today. I think we'll have a very interesting discussion around, I think, what is quite a hot topic in the industry today around growth of AI, in particular in cybersecurity, but focus particularly on what's happening on the industry of the challenge of stopping automated attacks and other bot activity against websites, APIs, and mobile apps. So I'm going to do a quick introduction, and then we will engage with the rest of the panel on some of these key questions that we're going to try and address today. I want to start by just giving a very high-level view of where we are in general on AI. AI, as you know, has been a particular buzzword over the last several months with the growth of some of the really major innovations in this area, particularly LLMs, which have definitely been groundbreaking and changing the world from the previous view, which was artificial narrow intelligence, into more of a world of artificial general intelligence. Obviously, there is still a long way to go in that area before we get to what people class as artificial general intelligence as such. And there's an even longer journey before we're anywhere near the world of artificial superintelligence and machine consciousness. And I think, the big question of whether we will ever get there, is that a possible dream? So that's the kind of world in general. But what about in the cyber security world? I think all three of us on the panel today were at the RSA conference in San Francisco earlier this year, and there was a definite sense in the keynote speeches around the growth of the use of offensive AI. I pulled out just a couple of quotes here. So Brian Palmer from Trellix saying, we've been barely staying ahead of the bad guys for years, but the tables have flipped now and it's an AI arms race and the enemies have taken the lead. And similarly, G2 Patel from Cisco saying, if you really think about sophistication of human attacks, this can no longer be handled at human scale. So you have to do this at machine scale. This is the world that we will live in. That was the definite sense of the keynotes, of the big visionary view of what was going on in the cyber world. As you got into more of the lower level seminars, there was a bit less of that kind of big view that this was something that was happening right now. And certainly we're seeing in sort of news articles and some research being done around the fact that maybe offensive AI is not being grabbed and used as extensively as the media might be portraying, particularly in the area of cybersecurity. I mean, Cyril, was this match what you're seeing out there when you're out on the forums, etc.?
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting because here they're talking specifically about generative AI, and there's a lot of different types of AI that are used, in cybersecurity, both for and against the good. And with generative AI especially, we've seen a lot of these actors talking about it and its current limitations. It's still quite a new technology, and their aspirations for it don't quite meet its capabilities at the moment. So there's definitely a hesitancy that we're seeing. I think looking at kind of bot management, bots in general, the main kind of goal for these adversaries at the moment with generative AI is using it for de-obfuscation. So a lot of the time they're spending is trying to understand the defensive technologies they're against and try and break down that code so they can find ways to bypass it. And, they've tried some simple stuff with like ChatGPT and then other kind of these technologies, try and do de-obfuscation tasks. And yeah, it works to a certain extent for some kind of low level code that you give it, but not a full defensive system. And that's really kind of what they're pushing for generative AI to help them in the near future. probably going to be a while before they get there, but that's the main focus.
Yeah, it's interesting because we've just done some research which um, we basically engaged some security professionals and asked the question, how soon, if at all, do you think AI attacks are going to be something you face every day? And there was definitely a sense that this was something coming, but not imminently. So a year to 2 years is definitely the average. I know, Sandy, is this reflecting what you're hearing with
You know,
your
it's
customers?
this is interesting, Andy, because if you're asking specifically about generative AI attacks, then maybe so. But I wonder if folks were answering this with more of an eye towards generative AI versus other types of AI, because other types of AI and bots and other sorts of attacks have been around for years, and organizations are probably facing attacks that at least have some AI components without realizing that they are. So I think there's a bit of a nuance in terms of what we mean by an AI attack. But yeah, I mean, if we're talking about generative AI attacks, I don't know about you, but most of what I've been hearing in terms of good use cases for it has been around making better phishing emails. And that might be something that folks are facing without realizing it, but they are probably also facing other types of attacks that do have AI components, and they may not know that there's AI involved in mounting those attacks.
Yeah, I think that definitely reflects the kind of sense of a lot of the AI industries that there's been big breakthroughs and this kind of sense of general purpose AI using chat GPT, etc. And now what people are doing is taking a step back and looking how you can use that technology for more specific tasks. As you say, phishing emails was one, and it's almost a game changer for phishing emails. That's
Agreed.
the days of being able to detect phishing emails just by grammar checks and things like that. They will very soon. Um, they'll very soon be over, and obviously dynamically generating multiple versions of it. Um, so yeah, I think it's very interesting to see. And I think going back to what you were saying earlier, Cyril, about how people are taking this to focus on the very specific task of, say, deobfuscation of code. Um, how do you think that will affect the particularly say the bot management industry that we're talking about today?
I think we'll do. I feel we're going to use the word arms race a lot, but it is really going to be an arms race here. At some point, it's going to be AI versus AI, right? You're gonna, if you supply client side code, the code is in the realm of the attacker, right? So you need to you need to obfuscate it in some way, and one AI gets good enough at deobfuscating it, then you're going to need AI obfuscating it, and it is the AI obfuscation. Why am I saying this word so much when I'm AI obfuscation versus the AI deobfuscation, and that arms race is going to be, it's going to be whoever gets there first. But I think the more interesting thing there is that, with these generative AIs, what they're really good at is generating text, generating images, and so on. And once you get past the obfuscation kind of bit, what's going to happen there is kind of trying to generate code. And at the moment, that's not really feasible because these have been trained on kind of the open internet where there's not as much specific code for what these attackers are trying to do. But given time and these attackers training it on their own code, we're going to see not only the obfuscation, but a bot that can be fully created with generative AI. And I think that's even scarier than the deobfuscation point.
Yeah, I think it's um, when we look at kind of the bot management as a whole, there's obviously a very large variance in the type of technologies that are used. And what we're seeing, as Sandy was saying earlier, is that AI is already a part of these attacks, but it's not. They're not. They're AI aided rather than AI driven a lot of the time. So we have some stats around, for example, using AI as part of capture bypass. So I think, Cyril, there's some stats that you had gathered looking at comparing human-based capture bypass to AI-based capture bypass. And it's already reflecting the fact that kind of that's solved from an AI point of view. Now that is as good as humans. In fact, so sometimes you think AI is
Wow.
actually better at
Yeah.
passing. Yeah.
I mean, it even raises a weird ethical question because generally for bots to self-capture, they would either send it to a human capture farm, which is these people in an economy with like lower incomes who are, sitting there at a computer solving the capture and sending the result back to the bot. And now you've got these AI ones which are doing it. And guess that's more ethical because it's not, I wouldn't, maybe not slave labor, but quite,
Yeah.
quite exploitation of the labor. So that's the positive in one way. But then on the other hand, you learn the cost. I mean, that is like what fractions of the cost of using a human. And as long as you can continue to lower the cost for the attackers, the attacks are going to become more widespread. But yeah, so generally what we're seeing now in terms of how AI is currently being used is these AI capture solvers, and also sometimes in terms of generating mouse movements, so generating realistic human-like mouse movements. If you can capture enough, you can train a GAN model on that and then replay that on sites. That's where people are using it now, but not the kind of the LLMs and the generative AI, which is going to be kind of the next phase.
Yeah. I mean, what's your thoughts, Sandy, on the role of something like capture in the future of bot protection, given that kind of the ease that it can be bypassed using AI?
Yeah, these are pretty impressive numbers. And, there's always been kind of a love-hate relationship with CAPTCHAs when I go out to the market. There's some percentage of end users that just get incredibly frustrated by them, as I'm sure most of the folks listening today and the three of us get really aggravated
Mm.
when we have to solve something. And, it adds friction. Some percentage of customers tend to want to walk away from it. And from the standpoint of an organization that is trying to have a good experience for their customers, keep their customers happy, keep them coming back to their site, if even 5, 10, 15% of customers leave the site, don't continue with the transaction because of a CAPTCHA, that's a problem. And the numbers that we've gotten on that are, in that range. It's, in the high teens of US consumers have said that they have walked away from a transaction because of a CAPTCHA. You can see here, you know, 53% of our US consumers felt somewhat frustrated. Not a great experience if you're trying to keep your customers happy. The 52%, though, is kind of interesting. There are some folks that feel safer. And I think some of this is just the visual indicator that something is being done, that some type of check or security is in place. I'm not convinced that everyone who's responding necessarily understands all of the underlying work that is or isn't happening, but they view this as a visual indicator that at least there's some sort of check. Now, I think if they went back to the data that Sarah was just showing, maybe they wouldn't feel as good about that in terms of safety. But it is interesting that there is a little bit of a love-hate relationship here with CAPTCHAs.
Yeah, no, from our point of view, I, we see capture as just a kind of another data point where we can gather some more information about a potential user. And key two key driving points to how we treat it. The first is that we show it to as minimum amount of people as possible, because exactly like you say, it really does annoy people. So we only show it to people when we think that they're high risk. And the other point is that you need to work on the assumption it will be bypassed. So
Yeah.
it is not a trust point. It's just another data gathering point, which you can use to gather more information about the user, but you do have to keep monitoring that. And you think, and as we go on the journey to AI, the world of offensive AI, I think there will just be more and more of those kind of, particularly client side elements, where previously you could depend on those as a reasonable way of detection. will become outdated. So Cyril, you mentioned already mouse movements as being a thing that AI is already replicating. The obfuscation of any client-side detection. I think we will see over time that client-side detection as a source of reliable cybersecurity will just diminish because of these threats there. Is that something that you guys would agree or disagree with?
I
I'll
think the
start,
note.
yeah.
Yeah, go ahead, Cyril.
Mhm.
I'll start. I think definitely I'll agree. I think the main touch points for these, especially the bot developers, is with the client side code. That's what they can see. That's what they can fight back against, and it's going to be the first point that they are going to use these technologies on. I think it's going to move from trying to beat those with, as I said, stuff like the deobfuscation and stuff, to kind of an AI that's generally taken over this strategy. But in the near term, it's going to be kind of how do we get past these blocks that we can see, which is either captures or client side code. When it's something server side, I think the problem is you don't know exactly what's happening. You don't know if you've been blocked. You don't know where you've been blocked, and it's a bit harder for you to train like an AI on that. And so that may happen in the future, but that's going to be after the first wave.
Yeah, I think it's interesting. I mean, the captchas have been such a huge part of this industry for so long, but now when I talk to the market, there really has been a shift among a lot of the experts and leaders and researchers around the efficacy of them. And certainly the data we showed earlier bears that out. I think it's also worth noting that, frustration is increasing. We talked about earlier about half are frustrated, but boomers in particular, 42% now, you know, felt very frustrated when encountering these. And that was a big jump year over year. So I think the other thing we're going to see is just as there is a greater increase in frustration, you're going to see more organizations, let's say, reconsider.
And I think part of that is going to be the more advanced AI gets and the easier it is for AI to sort of capture, the capture then needs to be more
The
difficult.
captures will get harder, and then the humans will have a harder time solving them.
Well, we've already seen that journey, haven't we, with the traditional capture with the wiggly letters. That
Oh,
they
I
got to
hate
the point
those.
where they were harder to solve by humans than AI, and
Yeah.
they're completely useless, aren't they? So I think like anything with the growth of any kind of offensive technology is usually driven by the need. As the defenses get better, then obviously the boundaries will be pushed. I think that alongside particularly in the AI world at the moment is as open source and other systems become more generally available for developers to take advantage of, then they'll be used a lot more commonly. So I think we'll see those two driving forces.
I
So
think that's one of the interesting challenges in the AI space is that it's very open. Um, Whether that's because, people are trying to have the have the prestige of, having released this library which is being used, but there's a lot of sharing out there, which means kind of when a technique is being pioneered, it's very quickly adopted and kind of proliferates really quickly. So
That's a really good point, Cyril. And I'm seeing this also with the just explosion in the past couple of years of bot services. I feel like a lot of these attacks are becoming very democratized. You don't need deep expertise. You can either, to your point, learn it from a lot of the information that's shared openly or buy into a service and have someone else do it for you entirely. So this type of attack that was perhaps once the domain of a handful of experts is now one more of a money-making venture for them in terms of finding other human customers to leverage their software, but also is now available to a wider range of people.
yeah, I think that for the ultimate change since I first came into this market to now is that democratization of tooling, platforms, software, and the professionalization as well. So these are not kind of rough bits of software that you download and you take a lot of work. These are professionally maintained with service levels, contracts, and they operate for a lot of this in a kind of gray area. They are semi-legitimate. So if you're a developer, this is a much lower risk way of taking advantage of this than actually, going full on into cybercrime.
And it creates a vicious cycle. I think I've talked to you about this before, but some of the research I've done, we've asked consumers if they have ever bought into a bot service in order to purchase hard to acquire inventory, whether that's, you know, gaming consoles or concert tickets or other types of highly desirable products. And a very high percentage said yes, particularly among the younger generation. So they're viewing this as kind of an if you can't beat them, join them type of scenario. If I can't get what I want on my own, yeah, I'm going to buy into a bot service in order to do so. And that means that the bots are going to become more and more pervasive and powerful in that situation. Yeah, thank you for showing this. This shows some of the data we found. We've got 31% of Gen Z, is it 25% of millennials that have used shopping bots or bot services to find products in the last year. And you can see that this is only going to increase because it really is being driven by our younger consumers.
Yeah, it's definitely, if you talk to people of that kind of generation, the sense that that's the only way to effectively get these products. If they are being sold out to bots very quickly, then like you say, if you can't beat them, you have to join them. And I think this, for us as an industry, it's a matter of how can we get on top of this, because I don't think it's how they it's not how the websites want to operate. It's not how the
Right.
companies want to operate, and it's not how people want to buy these things. So, that's the challenge. I think if we flip the conversation now to talk from offensive AI to talk about defensive AI, and we've got some stats here around the level of uptake of solutions that utilize AI. And they vary dramatically from different areas of web security. But even the highest one is only 62% of DDoS platforms are using any form of AI. Is this, from your point of view, Sandy, is this reflective of what you hear people talking about, that what they're looking for in a solution?
So, Andy, let me just clarify. You asked users here if they were using these products and if their use of these products had AI to conduct defenses, right?
Yeah.
So, one of the things that I have found in my research when we ask about just general adoption of application security tools, regardless of AI, web application firewalls are by far the most highly adopted tool in my coverage area, which is application security. Makes sense. They've been around for years. There are regulatory requirements that often mandate them, so they're very pervasive. API security is actually not far behind, which might be a little bit surprising when you think about how new a discipline that is, but it's come up very quickly, and a lot of organizations are racing to adopt some form of API security. So again, seeing that, right behind WAF doesn't surprise me. And bot management is a little bit more greenfield. There is lower adoption rates for bot management than for many of the other tools that I cover. I think I'll be sharing later some of the bot management adoption and planned adoption by industry. We may have that actually on the on this slide if I can show it briefly. You can see that depending on what industry we're in, adoption of bot management tooling is in the mid to upper 60% for our respondents. Financial services, pretty high. Business services, which includes tech, is fairly high. Retail and wholesale, 66%. Public sector, education, and healthcare, which is often behind in a lot of adoption. They're also behind in bot management, only 40% already adopting. And you can see planned adoption is generally around 20% of respondents planning to adopt these tools in the next year. By comparison, web application firewall numbers tend to come up in the upper 70s to 80% for a lot of these industries. So I wonder if some of what we're seeing, Andy, is that there is lower use of AI in bot management because there is lower use of bot management overall. When I actually look at the tooling, I think there is significant AI in a lot of those tools. A lot of the bot management tools out there have invested in significant machine learning models. So the AI is there. Now, whether everyone realizes it and takes full advantage of it is another question. But I actually think there's a fair amount of AI in the defenses. And I think the question is how broadly you're deploying those defenses.
Yeah, that's an interesting point because I would agree with that. I mean, I would say you can't do bot management without some form of AI in your detection. I think the attackers are a level of sophistication now, and the problem is complex enough that anything that doesn't have AI, um,
Yeah,
I don't
everyone
use
has
it.
machine learning models
Yeah.
at this point. That's table stakes.
Yes. Yeah. So it comes down to what they're using those machine learning models for, and I think that is just, as we've said earlier, that the approach to using AI is just going to evolve over time. But there is not a future where you're not using AI to detect um, automation within legitimate activity. I don't believe there's any other way of going about it. I mean, certainly our approach at Netacea from the start was AI only, because we couldn't see a more effective way of actually solving that complex problem. Just to flip to this kind of the second follow-up question we asked here, which I think was interesting, is that we then followed up by saying, has efficacy of security got better or worse since deploying AI? And I think this was again, I think, interesting that there wasn't anyone who didn't think it had got better. I don't know if, again, Cyril, if that reflects what you're hearing.
I mean, I think if you're investing in an AI system and it's not improving your efficacy, then you need to rethink your kind of the systems you're investing in, your procurement process. So I'm not so surprised that there was no no's here. I
I
think that
wonder if this is a actual sign of the times, because I think if you ask this same question probably 2 to 3 years ago, you might have got very different answers because there were a lot more products then that implied they were AI or said they were AI, but behind the scenes they weren't really AI. I think the just the general state of the industry in terms of what is available, how you can use AI legitimately, has that improved significantly? That maybe there is not as much of that what you might call vaporware as maybe it was a few years ago.
I think so, certainly from my perspective in the industries that I cover, Andy. I think if you went back a few years, everyone would say we have AI and it would be the equivalent of slapping the sticker on your product. And then when you actually dove into it, it would be a bunch of if then loops. And I think what we have today is much more sophisticated, much more data science driven. And therefore, yeah, there probably is a little bit more of an understanding of what AI is actually included in a particular offering and a better understanding of how that is helping. So there is definitely an increase in sophistication on the part of security vendors and an understanding of what they actually have to mean when they say we have AI. And consumers have become smarter. They're going to challenge it and say, all right, you say you have AI, but show me.
Yeah, show me it actually working. So yeah, I think that's definitely reflecting. I remember hearing a stat at one point: 80% of products that claim to have AI actually didn't. Um, and we were proud at that point because we were one of the 20%. But I imagine that is probably not, that stat would not exist in that form anymore, because I think there is genuinely complex solutions to complex problems being rolled out at the
yeah,
moment.
but I think as well with the recent explosion of Gen AI as you know as a thing in itself, that a lot of people may be equating Gen AI with their use AI and forgotten that actually AI has existed before ChatGPT came out. Uh, so that might be adding to the confusion where people are like, okay, what do I have AI in my solution? Okay, well, it's not a chatbot, so maybe I don't have AI in it, or other things, and making it harder or making it easier maybe for people to say, yeah, we've got AI, and a Gen AI piece would just really help with the the detection when we're talking about bot management or else. And I think that it ties in quite nicely with kind of what we've asked people in terms of the efficacy of AI and what it's actually um, done in terms of solution improving security, right? I think this is quite first private. Only 47% will talk about improving detection accuracy. Whereas if I'm thinking of what I want my AI to do in a kind of a WAP solution, that's going to be kind of the top of what I want, accuracy there. And then maybe remediation for me would be kind of a nice to have afterwards. But if you're not detecting in the first place, then how are you remediating?
You raise an interesting point, Cyril, because when I look at a lot of the adoption of Gen AI and LLMs in the security space, one of the early use cases that I'm certainly seeing in the AppSec space is more around that remediation, which makes sense. That's where LLMs are going to shine. They're going to be able to help make analysts and security pros' jobs easier, faster by surfacing recommendations, surfacing findings, and providing guidance on how to remediate and allowing them to do that in a much more streamlined way. I think that's awesome. But I also acknowledge that has nothing to do with the
Mhm.
detection side of it.
Yeah, I mean, going back to the quotes that we started with from RSA, all of those quotes went on to describe a world where um, security professionals could cut through the amount of um, alert fatigue that they were having at the moment to get right down to the source and act quickly on it. That was definitely the use case that was being focused on there. How can you get more for less with your limited team? How can you buy your team time to actually do more proactive rather than reactive work? So, which would again reflect, I think, improved effectiveness of remediation, mean time to remediate, mean time to detect, time from human analysis, all go into that same view of the fact that the world is getting more complex. So you've got millions of different sources of data coming in constantly. How can you aggregate those and get the value of those effectively? And in fact, what I thought was interesting from all those presentations at RSA, they were much more focused in getting information to humans to act upon rather than acting upon that automatically and informing a human later, which I think is the next stage where it is the ultimate future really will be, as I think Cyril, you mentioned earlier, AI v AI, machine on machine warfare. So all you are as the security professional is the person who's pointing your um, processes to and seeing the results back later, but ultimately the AI is fighting AI.
Yeah, I think there's probably going to be a hesitancy to get to that point because people don't want to give control to the AI. People want to feel like they are in control. We've got AI that's helping us, but we need to be in control. And there's almost this kind of preconception that an AI needs to be perfect before it's given control. So if you look at, let's say if a human did this, there's this 10% margin of error. And if AI did this, there's a 5% margin of error. People will look at the AI and go, nope, there's a 5% margin of error there. We can't trust it to the AI. So I think there's some work to be done in our industry and others to kind of educate on exactly what AI can do and what it should be doing, how it's helping reduce that margin of error. It might not be perfect and it might never get perfect until we get to the artificial super intelligence.
Yeah.
If that ever comes, if that ever comes, I'm hiding in the bunker because I'm sure bot management is not what those AIs are going to be doing.
Yeah, I think it's it's very interesting that there is that reticence against using AI, but equally AI in other situations is used constantly. without that need for human intervention, but people have to go on that journey. So just looking at this kind of view of the world and of how AI is used in other areas of cybersecurity, endpoint security, we've been using AI to automatically detect viruses for a number of years now, and that is done with no human interaction as well. And I think particularly on the the, the web world, the web security and app security world is actually a world where more is done automatically anyway. WAFs are acting and blocking things, and your bot management process is already acting and blocking on things without necessarily having a human level of intervention. So we've kind of a bit on that journey, but we need to get more of that automation and rapid deployment of updated detection methods. Sandy, what's your view on that?
It's interesting because I think you're right. There has been some AI in a lot of this for many years. And there are certain types of functions that folks have become comfortable with having AI manage. And I wonder if some of it comes down to scale, Andy, whether there just comes a point where the scale of finding is so much that the humans all look at each other and say, we give up. We haven't found a lot of issues here. We'll deal with the one-off customer complaint because we can't manage this scale anymore. And so going back to what Cyril, you were saying about sort of getting to that good enough stage, I think, you're not going to be 100% perfect. I start to see in other areas a little bit more comfort with auto remediation than maybe even a few years ago, because frankly, the more findings, the more fixes that have to be made, the harder it is for my two eyes and your two eyes and your two eyes, Andy, to keep track of all of that. And so we regularly reassess as humans what the extent to which we're willing to trust.
Yeah, I mean, I think even our journey at Netacea, the very early versions of our product, we just did detection of bots, and we presented that as a set of data that people would go in and review and add or remove to list. And it soon became clear that one, it was too many. We're asking people to do thousands of checks, and two, it wasn't fast enough. Um, we needed to be able to instantly act, and we needed to take people on that trust journey to say, look, you just have to depend that we will be correct the vast majority of times, and if we're not, then we need to tune our processes in the background to make sure that we're learning from that. But there was no other way of dealing with that. It wasn't practical or even possible even to deal with that and actually get the level of protection needed. And I think that will be the same um, going forward, not just in the bot management world, but we're already seeing, self-learning WAF processes. So there's not a release process for WAF rules in the same day there would have been 5-10 years ago, where it went through a testing and release process. The world is moving too fast now to be able to have the amount and the speed of change that's needed. All right. I think we've covered pretty much I think we've covered a lot of detail around what the impact of AI is, and I think hopefully we have addressed some of the worries that people have, and hopefully not created too many new worries about this fast changing world that we're entering into. Before we wind up the webinar, is there anything, Sandy, that you would like to raise that has not been discussed yet?
I don't think there's anything new. I think what I would reiterate, though, is that from the standpoint of an organization that's dealing with the bot problem, you have to expect that the bots are going to evolve very quickly, and that the defenses that you had in place 2 weeks ago may not be sufficient today, as the bot operators and the developers and the algorithms all continue to learn. So unfortunately, as Cyril said, yes, this is an arms race, and this is a constant cat and mouse game. This is a situation where we can't just set it and forget it, and we need to be actively engaged in the fight because the attackers are.
Yeah, 100%, 100% agreed on that, and that certainly reflects our daily life here at Netacea, where we are constantly trying to evolve what defenses that were perfectly adequate in the past. We have to be launching new ones of those daily, and we have got to be not only we need to be in a position where we can do that with no human intervention. So much of our defense is about not just stopping known attacks, but looking for new indicators of attacks that we have not seen before, but we need to be able to stop those as well. Same question to you, Cyril.
I mean, I'll just echo everything Sandy just said. Absolutely spot on. Only thing I'll add is that, and I think I said it earlier, with the Gen AI explosion, there's a lot of talk about AI, and people need to understand what different types of AI are useful for and make sure they pick the right type of AI for what they're trying to do. If you're trying to build a chatbot, Gen AI is great. If you're looking at remediation stuff, Gen AI is great. But if you're looking at detection, at the moment, maybe something else.
Great point.
Yeah, 100%, 100% agree with that, Cyril. I think the thing you mentioned earlier, people are saying there's a new explosion in AI technology, and that's come out in the last year, and in fact, there's a lot more AI technology. People are kind of saying AI is all new, whilst using facial recognition to log into their phone. So this is building upon a lot of work that's gone on over many years in improving the technology. Right, so I'd like to thank Cyril and Sandy for joining us today. I think it's been a great discussion, and thank you guys for making the time to do that. And I'd like to thank everyone who's listened in. I'll reassure everyone that whilst the subject of AI-driven bot attacks may seem quite terrifying, that at Netacea we're way in the battle here. So if you have any concerns about this, please get in touch with us, and we can help you out on that. Thank you very much, and enjoy.
Thanks, everyone. Thanks, Andy.